Hey everyone, my name is Abhijit. I am a certified life coach and a mental fitness enabler. Welcome to my channel. Please do take a moment to subscribe to my channel and do leave your comments. I'm sorry I stuttered there for a second. It was not intentional. Um, it's because today's topic is actually a very difficult topic to talk about, and I want to be as sensitive as I can about it. And I've just been thinking about this topic for a while now, and if I could share with utmost vulnerability over here that it's not easy to talk about this, right? So I'll do my best, and I hope that this starts a conversation. I hope that you guys can let me know what you think about this topic as well. Today's discussion is going to be along the lines of overcoming trauma and healing from trauma. And again, a trigger warning: if you're not in the space to listen to this particular video or this topic, I understand if you want to exit halfway through or even a few seconds into this. I completely understand. Whenever you're ready, feel free to jump right in. So let's, in one sense, begin with defining trauma itself. So you go by most textbooks. They talk about, in psychology at least, they talk about trauma being an emotional response to a very distressing event, right? And this distressing event could be sudden, as in like an accident that suddenly happens, or someone who passes away due to a heart attack or whatever. It happens suddenly, right? Or it could be prolonged exposure to something. So maybe abuse at home, or from a friend or someone or a family member who abuses you for months and years together, um, verbally, physically. Again, trigger warning: this is not, if this is not something you're in the space to listen to, then I understand. But fundamentally, right, um, it's a violation of your body and your mind. And a lot of rape victims, again, excuse me for using this if it's triggering you, I'm sorry. But it's important I speak about this: violence, rape, all these, you know, unfortunate occurrences, for the lack of a better word to even describe it, to be honest. All of this is what all this does fundamentally is it strips you of your safety. Okay, you don't feel safe anymore. That's the first thing. You look around, you talk to people, you would get scared. You would feel like someone's out there trying to get you, someone out there is trying to hurt you, harm you. You don't even feel safe around the people you care about anymore. And especially sometimes if a loved one is hurting you, it becomes that much more harder, because you're then conflicted. How can the same person who loves me also torment me like this, right? So it's not easy dealing with trauma that happens, of course, immediately. It's also not easy dealing with trauma that happens over a period of time. Many a times the trauma is that which hurts you physically, violates you physically and bodily, emotionally, mentally, with someone hurting you, actually, hurting you in that sense. Or it could also be when you lose someone, you lose a loved one. So here you're not physically violated, you're not emotionally violated. There's no violation here in that sense, but it's just like a shattering. Like everything you know now, everything you thought you know now, everything that you've loved about something or someone is all broken into little pieces of glasses, right? Little piece of glass. It's not easy dealing with that shrapnel continuously hurting you. And these little pieces of glass, they keep coming back as flashbacks and triggers. You see a certain color, you see a handkerchief, for instance, somewhere. You think, hey, this is, my father used to use this when he was alive, and that would trigger a whole response. Or you listen to a certain song being played. Maybe it was the same song that when you were dancing to in the club, someone came and violated you, physically. So there's always triggers. I'm just giving hypothetical situations. Again, this is just to to kind of, in one sense, put into words that it's a violation of safety. It's your visualization of safety. You don't feel safe anymore, you don't feel in control anymore. And this is in one sense what trauma does, right? It breaks you, it shatters you. You no longer know what to do in life, you no longer know what to do. You may even lose the will to live. It's not an easy space to be in. And there are two aspects to this, right? There is, for instance, post-traumatic stress disorder, which was something that was heavily recorded during the Vietnam War, right? If you've read the book The Body Keeps the Score by Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, he talks about, um, in his book, he talks about how the body, in fact, remembers trauma. It's a beautiful book. If you do get a chance to read it, um, it's a beautiful book. It talks about how trauma kind of is stored in the body, because what comes as flashbacks and triggers many of the times is the memory that is stored not just in the mind but also in the body. So your body remembers, right? Because your skin is also one of the five senses, and that is how your body remembers. It stores that information in your cells, in your memory cells. Unconsciously it keeps coming out. Sometimes you don't even have to see or get triggered by something specifically outside of you. It's already happening inside. Out of nowhere, you may just start suddenly feeling cold and low, right? It's not easy. This was something that was, with like war veterans, for example, it's a very classic documentation of PTSD during the Vietnam War, when soldiers um, broke in cold sweat after the war. They kept listening to gun violence and seeing their loved, their fellow soldiers die. The bloodshed, all of that would keep coming into their minds, and it would keep haunting them. Brave soldiers fighting, then losing the battle inside their own mind. Right? Trauma can do that. Trauma can bring down even the bravest of soldiers to bits and pieces, right? And then there is complex post-traumatic stress disorder, which is something that's being documented a lot more now, which is that, assuming a scenario where a soldier, specifically in a war situation, goes through something that's PTSD. Of course, after that he loses a loved one, or that soldier, if it's a woman, she loses a loved one, she loses a soldier, a fellow soldier. That's what I mean by loved one here. They lose a fellow soldier. They then go into a spiral. After that, it's always those thoughts, etc., that keep coming in. But PTSD, trauma itself, is not something that happens necessarily as an isolated event. What happens is that very trauma then also affects years on and years of everything else that you've been through, every self doubt you've been through till that journey up till wherever you've gotten to in life. And it's a cascading of events, it's a cascading of you completely disintegrating into pieces. Because then the problem is, even though it's not a specific event, people who lose their loved ones, especially, for them it's not just that the event of losing them, but it's also years and years of memory and identification with that relationship that's not torn into pieces, right? So the first step to do in dealing with trauma itself is first to recognize if you're even going through something traumatic. And the best way to recognize if you're going through something traumatic is in the fashion that we have discussed till now. If you've been through something along these lines, I don't ideally want to repeat it because it can be triggering for people, but the incidents I laid out, right? If you've been through a certain act or something like this, always reach out to a therapist first. I even put up a video on the differences between a therapist, a psychiatrist, and a life coach. Reach out to a therapist first so they can properly diagnose and understand if you have PTSD, if you have complex PTSD, or you have another variation of PTSD. And if you also have any other underlying mental health conditions such as anxiety or depression. A lot of people who have gone through trauma specifically, a soldier, taking the soldier example itself, he may have or she may have struggled with anxiety all their life, right? And then they go into war, and then all that happens about there. It's PTSD and trauma. So now you're dealing with the anxiety that you've had for until you became a soldier, and then the actual incident itself that is now triggering you, right? So in that sense, both need to be dealt with. So it's very important to understand from a therapist's point of view what you have, and then to work with a psychiatrist as well. So you have medication that helps you feel safe and centered, right? And initially, it's about working with the wounds. So it's best to then read a lot of resources, practice whatever your therapist tells you and your psychiatrist gives you as medication. Keep doing that religiously, and open up to a family member, open up to your therapist first. Let them then decide if you being at home is also a safe space. Let them talk to your family members if required, or your close set of friends. Remember that trauma cannot be fought alone, it has to be fought collectively. Okay, at least initially, when you're dealing with fresh wounds, if you were to get if you were to fracture your leg, right, you need someone to lift your bags for you in the meantime that you go to the hospital. You need someone to drive you because you probably can't drive yourself. You need a doctor over there to administer something for you. They may ask your friend or your to call your parents, so your parents will have to come then pay the bill for the treatment, right? So if you have a fracture in your leg, there is already so much of family and friends involved, and doctors involved in helping you treat your leg. If you're going through some kind of trauma, mental and emotional trauma, all the more reason and requirement and necessity that you bring people in. I know it's not easy to trust people in that kind of a situation, but remember that you can trust a therapist, right? You can trust a therapist. There are They are capable of being objective, and they are capable of being professional and giving you the compassion that you need and creating a safe space for you. They are capable of speaking to your family members and communicating what you need, right? If there is something you're not supposed to be hearing, or something you're not supposed to be given to eat, or keeping those triggers at bay for a period of time. So just like you would allow your legs to heal from a fracture, you need to allow your mind to heal from this fracture, right? So creating a safe space means that for some time, allow yourself to go through that shame, that guilt, whatever it is, talk in therapy, process it, and get to a point where you will then be able to educate yourself, right? Now, the thing is that as you're going through this, anything that anyone says may go right through your head because it's a very sensitive space. You would feel like you're in a soundproof room trying to scream and no one's there to hear what you're going through. But remember that it's just your mind playing tricks. It's not true. People do care. They just don't know how to care sometimes, which is where the education part comes in. They may not know what to say, when to say, how to say. That's where the education part comes in. Who can best give you that education? A therapist. Start there. Slowly get to a point where you're able to talk about this a lot more and you're able to educate yourself. There are books, there are videos, there are resources online. Dime a dozen. Your therapist can herself or himself recommend certain, resources. Go to support groups if your therapist organizes one. Go there, talk about things. You will come to understand that a lot of people are going through this also, right? Creating a space of safety is first and foremost important. If that means you have to take off work for some time, if that means you have to take a break from what you're doing, please do it. Okay, if you don't have your mind, if you don't have your mental setup in space, anything and everything you do will always come from a space of triggers and flashbacks. You have to give yourself time to process it. Okay, now the next thing is psychology versus spirituality. The way I've seen it is spirituality, a lot of spiritual books, texts. Just quoting this as an example, you don't have to think I'm coming or defending any religion or anything. But if I've read the Bhagavad Gita, and it talks so much about anxiety and desire and fear. And many of these topics are touched upon in psychology as well. And the way I look at it is psychology is the working of the mind. And it is, as I've started exploring spirituality more, I realized that psychology is actually a subset of spirituality, because spirituality, in one sense, is you realizing your own consciousness, right? And that begins with first understanding what you are not. And psychology, if you only remain in that space of psychology, so phase one is to first establish the psychology of it, which means you educate yourself, you understand what is going on, etc. And now you're much more aware and educated about this. Then there will come a time where a lot of people say, hey, I'm educated about this, I know how trauma works, but why am I still feeling traumatized? And that is because there is a certain words, language itself is a construct, right? You can never really put into words what energy feels like. You can never really put into words what silence feels like. Silence is also energy. Silence, in Sanskrit they call nishabda, which means that which is beyond words, right? So psychology for me is words. It helps you understand and educate yourself. Spirituality for me is beyond words. It is silence. And it is that very silence that trauma is scared of. It is that very silence that a lot of people are not comfortable with, because they're worried that if they sit quietly somewhere, someone is going to pounce at them from out of nowhere, right? So in that silence is where you start to experience divine love, true love. Now, I know a lot of people may not be particularly tuned in when I say things like divine love, so let's not go there. But let's just look at it this way, that there is psychology that helps you understand your psyche and the nature of trauma, and that also helps you understand what to say, what not to say, and you become educated for your own healing. The words, right, they give you a foundation for you to transcend your own trauma. So you go from identifying as someone who is traumatized or a victim to go to a stage where you're not identified with it. You look at it as something that has happened and something that is given you an opportunity to look inward, right? Now, at the very beginning stages itself, it's very insensitive to tell people that, hey, it's an opportunity for you to look inward, because it's not. Initially, it's not. It's cloudy, it's messy. It's not going to make sense, anything anyone says. Creating a space of safety and compassion is what you need to establish with psychology. The healing part of it comes with the medication, comes with psychology itself, and then bring in elements of spirituality so it can work in tandem with psychology. Spirituality is, at least my perception of it, the overarching umbrella of which psychology is a subset, physical fitness is a subset, right? So there you focus on mindfulness meditation, inner child healing meditation, where you come to a stage where you're able to look at the trauma itself objectively. And that's not an easy thing, because the incident has happened. You create a bit of safe space, right? So it's like this. Your leg is fractured. You have to give it time till it completely heals, which means the bones are in place, right? That is the psychology part of it. But the next part of it is the walking part of it, which is where psychology and spirituality both come. You have to start learning to walk with the leg. When you start walking with the leg, you may feel equal or more amount of pain than you felt during your trauma, during that incident or during the repeated sets of incidents. And that requires a lot of courage, right? Now, I don't want you to start thinking, oh my god, do I have to someday face my trauma, and then not even go as far as first processing the trauma and educating yourself. The thing is, if you have managed to educate yourself, half the battle is done. The remaining half of it is using the very words and the education you've learned now, going from theory to practical class. Basically, you have learned the mechanics of how to walk again after your legs are fractured. So they tell you need to wear crutches, you need to walk on that railing, on that bar, or they tell you put your, if you fractured your left leg, you put your right leg first, then use that to anchor, and then put your left leg forward, then pause, right? There are ways physiotherapists will teach you how to walk all over. Similarly, it's important to learn how to walk all over and how to again start embracing life. If you had an accident, right, and it has already traumatized you, like you're not going to say, I don't want to walk again, right? Going into that kind of a space is very dark. To want to walk again should always be the ultimatum, because this trauma, in the context of it, is an opportunity to want to get back on your feet again. That is where a life coach like me comes in, which means now you're in a space where you're a lot more comfortable looking at your trauma from an objective space and wanting to work on your triggers, wanting to work on becoming better, wanting to work on processing it, right? So that is where someone like me comes in. So just to summarize, if you've been through trauma, you've got nothing to be ashamed of. I'm really sorry you've been through it as well. In many ways, it is an opportunity to reflect. In many ways, it's an opportunity to explore more sides to you, of forgiving many other things in your life to you, of building that sense of compassion, of educating yourself further. And it's ideal that something like this shouldn't have to come up, but it has. And let's take accountability for our healing, responsibility for our healing. We don't have to take accountability and responsibility for the event, but we can take accountability and responsibility for the healing. And let's build a community, a very safe space for everyone to work in, right? And then slowly get there. And let's learn to explore the power of silence in the course of spirituality at some point. And someone like me as a life coach, I can curate a personalized life coaching plan, especially for a lot of people who want to be able to walk again, who want to be able to, go back to jobs or whatever that they want to do. Working in tandem with a therapist and a psychiatrist and a life coach, having a combination of these three, your three soldiers in one sense. You have a soldier of very close set of friends, if you have any, or family. If you have a pet, beautiful to have a pet. Right? Pet dogs are, for instance, heavenly in that sense. They're known to be very, very therapeutic. So you're not alone, is what I'm trying to say. And we'll get past this one step at a time. Right? I hope this video helps. I've put up a lot of other videos that I hope you can listen to in the meantime. I've spoken about meaning, about purpose, about social anxiety, things like that as well, topics like that as well. So do take a moment to subscribe to my channel, watch the other videos, leave your queries in the comments so I can try addressing them. And I hope to catch you guys soon. Remember, you're not alone. I'm here, I care, and you matter.